Tonight, a special edition of the Carolina Weather Group as disaster relief and recovery continues across the Carolinas from Helene. The latest on the available resources to you and loved ones. Plus, we explore the science that made this historic event take place in the first place. It is Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024. As we continue with Hurricane Helene disaster relief efforts across the Carolinas and across the Southeast, we welcome you into this live edition of the Carolina Weather Group. Scrolling at the bottom of our screen right now are ways that you can get assistance. FEMA is here to help you purchase essential items, secure temporary housing, and repair your home. There are 3 ways that you can apply for FEMA assistance if you live in one of the eligible areas: disasterassistance.gov, 1-800-621-3362, or the use of the FEMA app. On your screen right now, the North Carolina counties that qualify for FEMA assistance and the South Carolina counties as well. Those are subject to change, but those are the ones as of this airing. Also, if you're in North Carolina, you can dial a special hotline if you are in need of assistance for food or water. It's 211, or out of state, that's 1-888-892-1162 to get you to the United Way of North Carolina. If you're watching from out of state or even inside the state, that's also the number you can call to report a missing person. If you are still waiting to hear from a loved one, the United Way of North Carolina is keeping a list and will do their very best to try to help you connect with those loved ones. Our guests this week on the Carolina Weather Group: Brad Panovich from WCNC in Charlotte is back with us. We have Tim Buckley from WFMY. And joining us from the Carolina Weather Group, we have Jared Smith in Charleston and Frank Strait in Columbia, who is, I think, connecting his camera right now as we go ahead here and get started. Gentlemen, at this 9 o'clock hour, I'm sorry to say that the latest death toll figures from Helene across the United States puts it at least 180 deaths and counting. And as we've unfortunately been feeling and experiencing over the course of the last few days, we are still waiting to learn the extent of the impacts in all of the hardest hit areas. I think, Brad, I've heard you say this over and over and over again, is, there's so much we don't know yet until we get communication back online.
Yeah, and it's not a good thing. I mean, there's communities we haven't even officially heard from. I was talking to some helicopter pilots today who flew over some areas, and he said there's just some areas you can't reach, but they know there's people trapped in some isolated communities, and we don't really have a firm grasp on what's happening in there. And in particular, there's sections of like Yancey County, Mitchell County, even Upper Caldwell. Not Upper Caldwell, but Upper like McDowell County, and then Northern Ashe County. There's a few locations. These are areas like on a good weather day, nothing going on, are really hard to reach people. And it's kind of the reason some people go there. But when you get something like this, it's almost, you're just an island. You're in the middle of the sea of mountains, and nobody can get to you by foot, by air, or by communication right now. It's kind of scary because we just don't know. I hate that fact.
Yeah, we know tonight that not only is the National Guard from North Carolina and numerous other states on location, but President Biden has also approved the use of active military members to join the countless number of men and women, both military, government, and civilian, that are up there in the mountains trying to help folks. You can, of course, see in some of this video the high water that we've been dealing with over the course of the last few days. I should also let our viewers know, or our listeners on our audio podcast feed, if you want to help, we have relaunched our American Red Cross donation drive with our friends at Chaser Chat, Weather Brains, and Stormfront Freaks. There's a QR code on your screen or a link in the description if you wish to make a donation to the American Red Cross Disaster Relief Fund. We'll talk with everyone on our show here in a little bit about local efforts that are happening across the Carolinas. And we're also going to explore in this episode some of the science and weather that led up to Helene and made Helene what it was. A predecessor rain event is what we call it, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But Tim Buckley, let me ask you first, how are you doing? What have you guys been reporting on and experiencing on where you are at WFMY?
Yeah. Hey, guys, thanks for having me on. Here in the Piedmont, in the Triad area, we're just on the outside looking in to this disaster. And kind of from our point of view, we're feeling just, gosh, this could be us. It's so close, only a couple of counties outside of our area, but our region has just had, I feel, an outpouring of support, right? So people were even noticing today just around Greensboro that the traffic is a little bit more than it seems. It seems like there's a lot of people either coming out of the mountains to come here to get supplies and then go back, or they're coming from other parts of the state to go over there. We've had a lot of our reporters here from Channel 2 just out in the mountains the last 3-4 days, because initially part of the challenge was you couldn't get the word out to people, whether in the Carolinas or otherwise. You couldn't get the word out about how bad it was over there. We didn't have the pictures, we didn't have the videos, because the roads were closed and everything was flooded and you couldn't communicate from there. So it's really been our mission to just kind of raise that alarm bell and keep on ringing it throughout the last couple of days. And when you think you've seen it all, you see something else that just kind of makes your jaw drop. The images that you're sharing here of the washed out roadways that just seem to be like liquefied in some cases is just unbelievable, and something I can't remember seeing here in the Carolinas. Obviously, we're no stranger to storms, but to be quite honest with you, I'm pretty overwhelmed with the scope geographically. This is a huge chunk of not just North Carolina, but South Carolina and parts of Tennessee and parts of Georgia. It's really tough to take in for sure. But there's a lot of people that want to help, and they're already starting, and they're going to need to continue to do that for sure.
Yeah, Brad, you were out at a fundraiser today, one of many in the Concord area. Tell us a little bit about that response you saw.
So yeah, really cool organization, Operation Airdrop, which they're kind of the first people in, because they can take aviation assets, fixed wing or rotor helicopters in there, and they were basically airdropping or landing at airports as close as they could get to get supplies in before the roads were even remotely open. And so they really have been doing amazing. I think today and yesterday they did 325 flights. And most of these are civilian aircraft, by the way, and these are volunteers. And some of them, the fuel cost per hour is like in the thousands. But they're taking donations, and the outpouring's been incredible. And it was really quite the organization. I was really impressed, because you've got all these people collecting at a Walmart about a mile from the airport. It's taken over to this hangar. It's split up into these pallets. They're weighed carefully, because if you're a pilot, you're very conscious of how much weight's going on your plane. And then they're loaded onto planes and they're taking off. And looking out on the tarmac or the runways, you see all these planes at Concord Regional. Half of the planes out there, the guy was telling me, are all airdrop planes. It was unreal. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it from a logistics standpoint and from just a community outreach standpoint. It was absolutely amazing. And we're starting to see people from the mountains, as Tim said, coming to our area. We're seeing, some people that were there today helping out that had come from Asheville or had come from Boone, and they're temporarily relocating here. And you're hearing the stories firsthand that we didn't know about because we couldn't talk to them. And it's in some cases, like Tim said, you think you've heard it all and it's horrible. And then you talk to someone and it's like, holy cow, it's worse than I thought. And there's definitely trauma in these people's voices and the way they're talking. They saw things that people shouldn't see, basically, is what I heard a lot today.
Yeah, I feel like there are a lot of chapters still yet untold from this story. I heard in the South Carolina briefing the other day when one of the power officials got up and he was talking about power, but I think his quote could be applied to so much more. He said, this is not a recovery effort. This is a rebuilding effort, because when you look at the pictures that have come out of the mountains, it's not about just connecting a wire between two poles. It's about moving the mud out, finding the ground, getting the pole back in, and then doing it again a couple more feet down the road.
Yeah. James,
go ahead.
It blows my mind. You're right, because especially, just take, for example, the viral video of I-40. Right? There's a river where the interstate is right now. That's where the river is flowing. So I would love to talk to a civil engineer. What do? Do you move the river? Do you build a bridge? I mean, I don't even know how you do that, because there's nothing to put the road on. Do you truck dirt in there? Do you build a, I mean, yeah, I think that power official is correct, because it's like, you can't put a pole up because the ground where the pole was isn't there anymore.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, Logan Stewart from Duke Energy, different power company than the man I was referencing a moment ago. But Logan, she took to social media today to say, we are out here with these men and women who are stringing up these lines. They are in their communities and they are the ones rebuilding. Here's the video that Brad was referencing, and you can see, this is not just, oh, there's a pothole, we got to fill it in. Brad, you're right. The ground is just gone. We were also talking before we came on. We're going to get to the science behind predecessor rain event here in a moment for folks who are tuning in for the science, I swear. But before we nerd out, I feel like there's just so many things to touch on, and we're certainly not going to get to them all tonight. But Brad, you keyed in on trauma, and I think that's one of the chapters still to come in this narrative in the weeks ahead, both of course, for the people in the mountains and elsewhere, and also for all of the individuals who were cut off from their loved ones, worrying day in and day out whether or not their loved one was okay. People are still in that position now. And to an extent as well, not to make this about any of us, right? But also the first responders, the broadcast people, anyone who has been consuming all of these images. It's not healthy.
No, and unfortunately, I've gone through this before with Katrina, covering it firsthand, and that's one of the things that really stuck with me was we were doing 12-hour shifts every day, and so you can get buried in your work, right, where you're just working, and then I just remember I could come back to Charlotte. I felt super guilty that I had a place to go back to, but every day at work at the station, everyone's family had evacuated, so they're states away. They're by themselves working 12-hour shifts covering this. And I would say once or twice a day through the first 5, 6, 7 days, somebody would for the better part of explaining, break down. Like,
yeah,
it's like their mind was coming to grips with this personally more so than, work related. Like, I don't have a house. My family's not here. It's like, and the thing is, like, from a trauma standpoint, it's great when you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. In some of these cases, it's like you can't even see anything. It's like, how are you ever going to be back to normal again? So, yeah, I think trauma-wise is something. And one thing I would caution everybody, anyone listening to this that's a first responder working, I've learned, take a break. You've got to unplug. Go do whatever. Go for a walk. Play with your dog. Play with your kids. Play with your family. The first responders do better when they take these breaks and then they dive back in. And I saw a couple today. There was a rescue crew, real nice guy. He had been in Florida, and when they were in Tallahassee, thought it was going to get crushed. They got moved up here. So they have a policy where they're 5 on and then 2 off. They work really long hours, but they take 2 days off, and then they get back on the 5-day shift. And so he was back in Charlotte taking his break, and he came, of all things, he came out and helped with the donation drive today. Those are the kind of people that are just blow my mind. But those are the people that are out there. It's crazy.
So I'm going to embarrass him a little bit because this is probably not what he was intending when he put it in the comments. But take a look at this Facebook comment, guys. Clay Cheney writing, prayers for all involved. Thank you for all the great work. Clay, thank you for all the great work. For anyone who doesn't know, Clay is one of the many hardworking meteorologists at National Weather Service, Greenville, Spartanburg, and the National Weather Service offices across the region. But GSP, in the heart of this, thank you, Clay. I can't imagine what it was like. You guys were issuing all of these evacuation orders and these flash flood emergencies. You at home, every time you were getting a warning, they were having to process all of this data. And I can't even imagine what that was like.
The statements they were issuing ahead of time were spot on, and really goes to show you that there was a good grasp meteorologically, unfortunately, of what was going to happen. But I think even as meteorologists, it was like, yeah, but we didn't even think it would be this bad. It's like, I honestly thought about some of the maps and graphics and wording I used. I had extreme rainfall in the mountains on Tuesday last week. That's the highest color and wording we use, but in many cases it wasn't extreme enough. I needed new adjectives or colors. It's just shocking to me that one of those things, this is the worst thing you're ever going to see, and it's like 10 times worse than that. It's really difficult to explain and put into words, and that's probably the biggest difficulty in meteorology. I think modern meteorology, the science is really sound, the forecasting is really good, the communication of risk is really difficult. It is incredibly hard. It's something that I think we struggle with all the time. And we live in a society where we have optimism bias. We think bad things aren't going to happen to us, even when we know bad things are happening. We also think everything is hype and social media, clickbait, and it's hard to decipher when things are really going to be bad, and they are. But I will tell you, I don't think we're going to have any trouble going forward getting people to take these storms seriously. You talk to anyone in Charlotte after Hugo, you talk to anyone in Southeast Louisiana after Katrina, and now Helene is going to make everybody in the mountains look at hurricanes and tropical storms completely different for generations.
I took some relief, Brad, when you took to social and you said this is the Katrina of the mountains, because I didn't work Katrina. Like you worked Katrina and so many other people did. And when you said that, it made me feel better because I was like, that's what this feels like to me. And I think it kind of validated that a little bit. Clay writing back in as he watches with us on Facebook, it was a team effort at GSP, as I'm sure it was at so many other weather service offices. I was going to end the show with their note, but since Clay, you're here now and we're talking about you guys, GSP took to social media last week, and if you guys will just permit me for a moment to read this out for our audio podcast listeners, they posted this on September 28th in the immediate aftermath of the storm, just an open letter, if you will, to the residents of their area in Western Carolinas, both north and south and northeast Georgia. We are devastated by the horrific flooding and widespread wind damage that was caused by Hurricane Helene across our forecast area, they wrote. There are no words to express our sorrow at the loss of life and incredible impacts of property. Our mission is to provide critical life-saving forecasts and warnings for hazardous weather events. As meteorologists, we always want to get the forecast right. This is one we wanted to get wrong. This is the worst event in our office's history. We want everyone to know that our thoughts and our prayers are with the residents and the first responders across the area as we go through the historic event together. They continue, our hearts are heavy this weekend, knowing that our neighbors, friends, and families are dealing with so much. We live here too. We are proud to be part of this community and are grateful to serve the wonderful people of Western Carolinas and Northeast Georgia. We will be here with you every step of the way through the response, effort, and recovery process. We'd like to add a special message of appreciation to the first responders, including linemen, who are working around the clock and putting themselves in danger. Thank you all. Sincerely, the National Weather Service Office in Greenville, Spartanburg. I thought they hit so many notes there, and it was so well said. Frank Strait is joining us from the Carolina Weather Group in Columbia, South Carolina, and his day job is also in government, and I'm sure you've seen some of the response efforts coming out of Columbia, Frank. What in your experience, can you share with us about how the community is processing all this?
Well, I can say first and foremost that I'm glad things around Columbia aren't as bad as they are in the upstate and Western North Carolina. But we did have our fair share of problems. The Congaree River went to major flood stage. The Saluda River did. There was some flash flooding around here. There were plenty of wind damage too. The Columbia Airport had multiple gusts over 60 miles an hour. But that's nothing compared to areas north and west. The Augusta Airport had an 82-mile-an-hour wind gust, for example. And the Columbia Weather Service Office, their survey teams, in addition to the tornadoes they've been surveying, they've just been surveying wind damage around the area too, and they found evidence of wind gusts over 100 miles an hour in the central Savannah River area, at least on the Georgia side of the Savannah River. So obviously it's really bad there, and it looks as though Helene did manage to maintain hurricane intensity at least that far inland, and I kind of suspect it'll be determined that eventually it'll be determined that South Carolina did get a hurricane from Helene too, judging by the amount of wind damage that's occurred over the upstate of South Carolina and even in the higher ground in North Carolina too. And that's something we were worried about in advance, that there would be some significant wind damage in addition to all the flooding we had to deal with. But anyway, just looking around here in South Carolina, we still, around the Midlands here, we're still dealing with a lot of power outages, but things are recovering and starting to recover quickly here. Over in Georgia, the same could be said, but it's a slower process because there's more damage. Same thing for upstate South Carolina. One of the things I've noticed, and don't panic everyone, because I think we're going to be okay here, but even here around Columbia, I was at the grocery store yesterday and then again today, and I've noticed there are a lot of shortages on a lot of different products. So I don't think that's going to be a long-term thing, but don't be surprised if that continues. And there are many reasons why that's happening. Supply routes are cut off, and you have to reroute trucks. I'm sure that there were some shipments that were lost along the way. They got caught up in the storm, and plenty of other reasons too. So don't panic, everyone, if you see a lot of empty spots on the shelves at this point. But keep in mind that if you go to the grocery store, you may not be able to find the thing you want or even need at this point. But again, just don't panic over it. One of the things that caught me, I'm going to share my screen here real quick and show you the plot from the damage assessment tool. And it won't let me share my screen. What have I done wrong? Oh, I put the wrong one. Let's see if that. There we go. Okay, there's the damage assessment toolkit, and it shows the list of tornadoes. We're up to 21 in South Carolina, tornadoes that occurred associated with Helene. So in addition to all the wind damage that occurred, and it was there were some strong winds in the low country too. I think the peak gust was down in Beaufort County with 75 miles an hour down there. But we also had a bunch of tornadoes. Some of them were unusually wide. If you looked over the statements from the National Weather Service describing the tornadoes that have occurred, and I think it's this one in Sumter County that was about 2/3 of a mile wide. It was about 1,000 yards wide, which is strange for EF1s and EF0s, but that was the case with some of these tornadoes. But the one thing I wanted to pick out, this tornado right here, the one that affected northern Orangeburg, a portion of Calhoun County and Lexington County. That was at about 1:20 in the morning. I put the cursor right there. See the tip of my cursor? That's where my house is. So I'm glad that tornado ended because I was actually trying to sleep at the time. I thought, I better get to bed early because I know I'd be up at probably 3:30 or 4, and that was the case. That's when the winds really started getting bad around here. But that tornado came at 1:20 when I was trying to sleep, so I'm glad it lifted when it did, or else it would have been up a little earlier when my phone went bonkers with the tornado warning. So I'm glad that didn't happen. But anyway, it just goes to show we've have a variety of things we're having to deal with, and a lengthy recovery period here in South Carolina. It may not be as severe as it is in Western North Carolina or over in Georgia, but it is still pretty severe here in South Carolina. So I hope that we're in your prayers as well as the surrounding states.
Frank, I think those are some really good points you brought up, and I'm glad you did. We're going to bring Tim and Brad back in here in just a moment. But, the South Carolina Climate Office preliminarily putting out that the highest rainfall amount in that state looks to be just shy of 20 inches, currently putting it behind Florence and behind Debbie. North Carolina's Climate Office also doing assessments and finding so far that they've got rainfall rates as high, or I should say total rainfall amounts as high as 31 inches. Looking back at the storm, as Frank just mentioned, this really impacted directly Georgia and South Carolina into North Carolina, with the idea that we definitely did have at least hurricane force gusts. And as we continue to get more data, we're likely to find it could have been even higher, because as we look at the satellite image that is making its round on social tonight, the normal nighttime above, look down below, you can see those blacked out areas that lost power, but also, as Brad's been now telling us on TV, and I'm sure Tim has too, lost communication back to the weather instruments. So it's probably been long enough for our audience. So we titled this episode, "What Caused Helene to Be as Bad as It Was?" Tim, I know you published something on WFMY's website and did a piece on it. Tell us, what is a PRE? What is a predecessor rain event? And how did it help contribute to the disaster that is still ongoing?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, we know all about the hurricane. We know that it's strong, and it was a Cat 4, and I believe it was a Cat 4 the day after it was a tropical storm. So we know all about rapid intensification lately. We see it too much now with those storms getting super strong right away. But anybody that lives in the Asheville area or anywhere in the mountains, or honestly, most of the Carolinas, it rained like mad for a couple days, and that's not the only rain we've gotten in the last couple of weeks, but it certainly was particularly intense. in the mountain areas, which mountains, what do? They can change the weather by lifting the air up and causing more upward motion, causing more condensation, and turn regular rain into heavier rain. And so they dealt with that. We had this stalled front out to the west. Gosh, how long was it there? A couple days, I suppose, right? And with it being out there, there was an upper low just off to the west that was kind of chugging this along and allowing more of that fire hose of moisture of sorts to come in from the Gulf. I'll be honest with you guys, I didn't know what a predecessor rain event was by its term until this week. I've lived through them before. I've seen them before. I've observed them, but that's a new term for me, and it's one I wouldn't like to have to do more lately, because this was really what set the stage. I was talking to a reporter today, and I was trying to explain why is that bad. It's like if you buy a new sponge from the store and you're going to use it for the first time. You take it out of the wrapper, you go clean up a big mess you made on the counter, you soak it all the way up with the water, and then there's no more room for more water. So that's basically what happened to the ground out in western North Carolina, is that it was saturated. So all of the rain that came in from the hurricane was going to be runoff. And then it runs off. Of course, they have terrain out there too. So it gets funneled into the valleys, funneled into the rivers and creeks, which were already swollen because of the flooding. And it just set the stage for that big storm, the hurricane part, to be much more intense. And those watching on the video here, you can say a fun word, orographic lifting. There you go. But we're talking about that air going up, just making things worse. And I really have found a disconnect with, I think, the general public. If you're a weather weenie, you know about this. But if the general public doesn't maybe realize the effect that terrain and elevation can play on the weather. If you look at a rainfall map, there's a little bubble right by the landfall in Florida, and there's a big bubble right where the mountains are. And that has everything to do with that moisture getting forced to ascend. Our mountains are tall, guys. You know, they're the tallest on the East Coast in some cases, over 6,000 feet. And that just enhances and makes all of that water so much worse. And that's why you saw the 30-inch rain totals. I don't know how bad it would have been without the predecessor rain event. It sure would have been bad even so, but maybe not quite to the level that it was.
Brad, one of the things we were talking about right before we went live today was, it was a week ago that this event started. We were doing our Carolina Weather Group podcast last Wednesday night. We had Tim on, in no way calling Brad out, but just to prove a point, right? Brad was going to hop on, then suddenly got a tornado warning. Jason was going to hop on from Asheville and suddenly got a flash flood warning. That was Wednesday. The thing didn't make landfall until late Thursday, early Friday night in Florida. So, Brad, about this time last week, you were trying to convey your forecast and your warning. But right before we went live tonight, I think we're doing some self-reflection on the words and the social science. Tell us a little bit about your thought process on what you're currently working through in your head.
So I think meteorologists do this, and it's not just because we're meteorologists. I think we always learn from the past and learn from mistakes or even success. We always like looking back. It's a verification process. So I do this quite often, but I went back and looked at the maps, the wording, what I did last week, and ironically enough, this predecessor rain event I was pretty familiar with from the flooding that happened in New England and the Northeast with some previous events. So I had started reading some research, about a year ago on this. And I actually kind of recognized what was happening early last week. And I actually made a graphic talking about the ongoing predecessor rain event. I even talked on the air. So I think it was a little too much inside baseball, but I was kind of explaining what they were. And I've put out my first map last Tuesday with extreme rainfall, the highest word we use for rainfall and the brightest color. And it still wasn't enough. It's like you make that and you go, what word? I was at the highest level of what we would expect for weather, but I don't know if it conveyed it correctly. And Tim's dead on. This predecessor event was a big deal. The mountains can't handle rain. I think there's three things that happen when it rains, right? Rain either gets absorbed by the ground, it evaporates, or it runs off. Okay. When you get a predecessor rain event, you don't have any absorption and you don't have any evaporation. It's all runoff, okay? And when you put a mountain in there on top of that, the runoff is accelerated tenfold. So in many ways, you could not have drawn up a more diabolical atmospheric setup for a flash flood event. It's just that. And for everyone who says, why don't people evacuate? Hey, it was a flash flood. By its definition, you didn't know it was happening until it was happening. Okay. It's not like a river flood, like here in Charlotte, we evacuated Riverside Drive, or a storm surge warning where you have 3 days to get people out of the way. Flash flood warning gets issued when it's flooding. It's not like a precursor thing. And if you live in a mountain, why would you ever evacuate for a flash flood? You're on a mountain. So I think that's one of those things I think people really need to dispel. It's that isn't an option, right? And first of all, if you told the mountains of North Carolina to evacuate before a storm, none of those people are leaving. I mean, I couldn't get people to leave Southeast Louisiana under sea level, okay, before a hurricane. How are you going to get people in the mountains to leave? So I think it's just, we're looking for someone to blame. And in some cases, the person we need to blame is Mother Nature. Okay. There's sometimes Mother Nature just wins,
Here's your graphic, as you mentioned, from September 26th. And then there was probably one even before this, because this was Thursday.
It's funny. That's the WPC one. I actually hand drew one before they even went to the extreme, because kind of saw what was happening. And it was nice to see them actually kind of confirm it, but they didn't go out. Their time frame wasn't as early.
Yeah, they only go like 3 days, right? But
yeah,
we'll compare this to what ended up happening, right? Because here are the flash flood emergencies, and you can see exactly how they kind of lay right over each other.
I mean, that's wild. The first flash flood emergency I remember in our area was Hurricane Florence, and it was like 1 or 2 counties. We had every single county in our mountain foothills under a flash flood warning for, in some cases, a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
It was just wild.
I think today was the first day that no one was under even a flood warning. Never mind a flood emergency, which we should explain to people is even higher than a warning.
I thought about pulling that up because I was trying to figure out like what was the longest duration for a flood warning in the GSP's area, because it was one of the longest stretches I've seen. It's just wild. So I mean, James, to your point, there's a lot of self-reflecting. I think a lot of us will look back. I mean, social scientists will study this for years, and meteorologists, and I think I've learned over the years, like, it's good to do that, but it's also, you just know that there's some things just happen. I mean, it's not, you can't always prevent everything. You can't stop everything. I think the biggest thing you hope to learn is, like, when you see some of these kind of tips or, kind of precursor things that you kind of like give people a heads up, like, hey, this is a possibility. And like I said before, I don't think we're going to have to convince a whole bunch of people to leave or, take these things seriously. I think the biggest thing we probably missed on this was, people should have been prepared to be without power for days. And we were really hitting that home and being cut off. I think those are things, the preparation part is something that's really easy to do, because even if you're wrong, like I think the GSP was dead on, you hope you're wrong on the forecast. Having a kit together isn't gonna cost you anything, really. I mean, you can use it for another event, right? And you could always use it for something else. So I think preparation is something I think going forward people will prepare for, hopefully more for these big events.
And I'll tell you, right, the night before I went, I got supplies. Maybe not to the level you're describing, to be fair, right? I was probably in that same situation, but I was like, I got food. And I go look and I went, it's all expired. It's all really, really expired. So even if you think you have it, go check it, because food goes bad after a while, even if it's shelf stable. I thought this comment from YouTube, Marcia, I believe it is, we could not all have evacuated. It would have been an insane traffic jam on 2-lane roads, right? Because to your point from earlier, Brad, what cell phone signal in the mountains on a sunny day is limited, and so is roads. Some of these communities are literally one lane in, one lane out.
Yeah, it's just silly. I've heard that so much online, and I think it's people that just don't understand the Southern Appalachians. They just don't get this region. I think that's always the default. It's like, these people should get out of the way, and it's like, that's not really the way it works here. People don't evacuate for these things in the mountains. Like, we have this thing, you run from the water and hide from the wind, but the run from the water part's for the coast, right? You get out of the way of storm surge. If you're in a flood plain, yeah, sure, evacuate or go to higher ground. But the flooding we're seeing, these people didn't live in a floodplain. They didn't live in a flood prone area. They lived in an area where it literally never flooded in their entire life and their grandparents' life, and in some cases their great grandparents' life. This wasn't like something you could just say, I think the one thing, we had some good historical perspective going into this. There was a lot of talk about 1940 and 1916. Okay, that's great, guys. But unless you're between 86 and 106 years old, you have no idea what that means. I mean, it's like something in a book, right? And who's read a book on this stuff? So that's really difficult. It's like, here's a black and white picture of what it looked like back then. And everyone's like, I don't even know what that is, because they don't remember that. They probably saw these flood markers all over the place that said, this is the flood of 1916 and stuff, but probably just thought it was a historical marker and that it was nothing, never like that was going to happen.
It's hard to get people to understand something they've never seen before, right? And so if you haven't seen it, you don't know really what's possible. It's hard to take that in the abstract. They could be Brad's biggest fan, but even if he's saying the flood's going to get up to this side of your house, you might say, I don't really know. Like, I've never seen that before. That's got to be really crazy.
And I'll say, I think your words, Tim, apply to me and probably all of us too, right? Even if we knew exactly what was going to happen, where it was going to happen, I don't know that I would have the words to explain it to somebody else or the words to make my brain really comprehend. So I'm, to be fair,
think of how silly. I mean, your point, James, think of how weird if I would have gone on the air on Wednesday and said, whole valleys will be wiped out. And I mean, people would have said, you're an idiot. All right. You're hyping and you're crazy. And even if I'm 100% right, people still would have thought that, right? It's really hard to tell people, because the biggest fear we have is like saying something like that and being wrong is almost as detrimental as it being right. And so in some cases, there's not anything you could have said. I think the wording actually in the forecast was surprisingly pretty good. We can quibble about the little jaunt to the right, and I think that was more of a wind forecast screw up than a rainfall. The rainfall was coming regardless. I think if there's one thing I could tell last week, I got really worried when I started seeing people focus on the cone a little too much. And I tried to build a lot of different graphics last week talking about the track of the impacts versus where the cone was going. And I still saw people when I would show the cone and it going into Tennessee, like, oh, it's going to miss us. And I'm like, nope, that's the worst case track.
The dirty side.
I'd rather it come towards us. It can go 200 miles to our west and we're still in bad shape.
Yeah.
I think people don't understand that east side, that storm has to be like in the Central Plains west to be out of the woods for us. It can't just be to the west in Tennessee. That's horrible for the mountains. All of the big events since I've been here, since 2002, every big flood event, tornado event has been a landfalling hurricane in the Florida Panhandle. It is just like, that is like worse than coming in from coastal Carolina for us.
Yeah. And we haven't talked about the speed of approach either, right? So like it hit, because I remember for us, Michael was the more recent one for us that, and we weren't quite expecting the winds to be as high, but the fact that it hits the Panhandle and it's here 18 hours later is just a kiss of death for the winds.
It's funny you say that, Tim. That's what I kept thinking about was Michael and how boy, I was like, man, Michael kind of surprised us that wind. That wind we had a lot of damage here from wind from Michael. And so I remembered that. And I started talking about that. Like, hey, when Michael made landfall here as a Cat 4, or it was a Cat 5 ended up at hindsight, it was a big problem for power outages for us here.
I will also draw back to comparison because you talk about a tropical system going really, really quickly. And Frank, let me go to you in this one. Drawing comparisons to Hugo.
Right. It's one of the things I posted on Facebook to my friends. I said, this is Hugo Jr. coming. I'm not sure if the word junior applies. I mean, yeah, if you take what happened in Florida and transport that to the low country of South Carolina and then tack on everything else that happened here in South Carolina, then you've got Hugo. But still, it's pretty bad. The upstate region didn't really have all that much wind in Hugo. So this is worse than Hugo was there. I can't, off the top of my head, think of any event that caused this much wind. I can think of some, of course, 1916. That was a 1-2 punch of tropical cyclones that did that to the western North Carolina and upstate South Carolina. So that's a situation that was as bad with the flooding. I can't think of any situation in the past where we had both the wind and the flooding, rain. And this is probably a little worse than 1916 was. Kind of hard to compare just going by river stages and what little rainfall data we have from 1916 to compare it to today. Those river stages are kind of like comparing an apple to an orange anyway, because the rivers change over time. You add dams to them and so forth. So it's kind of hard to compare a river stage from 1916 to one from 2024. But the discussion you were just having, a few things come to mind. Like, for example, with Brad talking about you're in the mountains, you don't think to evacuate. Even if you do think to evacuate, where are you going to go? If you're in the mountains, okay, you're going to be in the valley where it's going to flood and you're going to drown, or do you want to go up to the hillside where there's going to be a landslide? You're going down with it. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
So if you're in the mountains, you don't really think about evacuating, because even if you could evacuate, where are you going to go? Other thing that came up during this discussion, James, call up my screen share again.
Okay.
Remember that, this part of the country's been in a feast famine in terms of rainfall. We were in a drought in South Carolina and a lot of North Carolina, Western North Carolina too, before the predecessor rain event. Didn't matter, did it?
Wow,
It might have actually made things worse in some areas because the ground was hard. This kind of was a perfect storm of everything coming together to be a total disaster for the Southern Appalachians and vicinity here. And it's just hard to fathom everything. And thinking, in my thought process, thinking about what I was doing Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday as the storm was approaching, think, yeah, if I could have been more bold, I would have. But like Brad, I don't think I would have forecast a hurricane causing down trees all over the place, along with the extreme flooding that we had. I don't think I would have been that bold, because people, like Brad said, people would have thought I was a lunatic saying that. I took enough heat for putting what I did put in my weather alerts because they were pretty beefy. So, right, it's hard to do. But the one kind of parting thought for this here I have is that the work we're doing right now to chronicle what's happened is really important, because this has happened now, and it's something like it has happened in the past 100 or so years ago, and we didn't really have good data from back then. But the next time it happens, we will have a good historical perspective because of what we're doing now. So that's why it's important that we put the effort into chronicling things and summarize them effectively for our state and local leaders of the future, and to have all this video to be able to play to show people what happened, things that we don't have from 1916, so that when it happens the next time in 2132 or whatever, hopefully it's at least that long before it happens. Hopefully it's 500 years before it happens again, but eventually it will. And when it does, we do have all of this information that people can review and be able to show what happened here.
Yeah, as a producer,
have in the past.
I'm not a meteorologist.
Fall back on here.
Yeah, so as a producer, not as a meteorologist, right? You guys are talking about the forecast. I'm thinking right now about producing this news coverage, and I'm looking at the imagery, and I'm having a lot of self-reflection on, what is too graphic, what is just exploitive, what is, and this goes to Frank's point, helping to tell the story, helping to document for history, helping to, and to Brad's point earlier, pictures are worth 1,000 words. So if we're trying to come up with the words to explain the extent, maybe pictures are what are necessary there in the right balance. Brad, I know you got to go in a moment. Do you have a closing thought for us before you hop off?
No, I think Frank is really on point there. Looking back, this is kind of what we do as meteorologists. And, it is tough. I think you're right from a producer standpoint. How do you, come to grips with, should we be in there? But I'll tell you honestly, this is the first time in a long time where people, I think, want us in there. They want us telling the stories because they feel like they're not being heard. And they want these stories told. And, as cell service and people get out, you're starting to see the video and hear the stories of what was going on in the height of the storm that we never knew. And I think the important part about that is it illustrates, like we were saying before, it's hard to understand what 20 to 30 inches of rain looks like in the mountains. Well, these pictures and videos will show you what it looks like. And hopefully maybe out west or in the Northeast or another section of the country, people will look at that pictures and videos and say, this is what I need to be prepared for if we ever see anything similar. And also, the other part of this is it helps other people in other parts of the country know the seriousness of what's happening here. I think locally, the reporting has been amazing. we've been talking about this storm a week going in. We've been all over it. But I do hear often from people in other parts of the country, like 2 or 3 days after the fact, are just coming to the realization of how bad it was.
Mhm.
That's important because it helps get more stuff here, right? As you heard from Frank, there's some shortages in North and South Carolina. Some of that is more to do with people buying up stuff here and people sending it to the mountains and people in the mountains coming to these locations to get stuff.
Right.
So the best way to replenish that is to get stuff from other parts of the country. We got this port strike going on, which I think people are probably blown a little out of proportion because toilet paper and water is not manufactured overseas. It's made in the United States. It's not coming through a port, okay? It's coming on a truck or a train. We're okay with that stuff. Cars and electronics may be a different story, but a lot of this stuff is here. It just needs to come and be sourced from other parts of the country. So letting them know, hey, this is what's going on. Hopefully we can get companies that have some of this supply to send it here because there's stuff we need. I mean, one of the things we can't find here locally, gas cans, because to get gas to take to the mountains where there is no gas, you need something to put it in. Well, good luck finding a gas can anywhere in Charlotte right now. You cannot find it anywhere.
I've got one. I'm going to pass off to you when you go up to Lake Lure. It's only one, but we'll crowdsource a couple of them.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Brad. Brad will be on WCNC Charlotte tonight at 11 talking more about predecessor rain events, which I think is why the studio lights are turning on behind him. Thanks, Brad. Tim, before we let you go, I'm hoping you can help us with a comment we got in just a moment ago from Nick and Bricks on YouTube. Why was Helene so detrimental to Western North Carolina compared to other states? Was it the mountain, the geography, aging infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera?
Sure. I know a lot more about the weather than I do about the roads, certainly. But this was just, a generational amount of rain, number one. So you have about 30 inches of rain. To put it in perspective, a lot of parts in the eastern U.S. get about 40 inches of rain a year. So you get that in a couple days. That's the rain. But why was it worse here? Well, we talked a little bit before about the terrain. If you've been to Western North Carolina, you experience this. It's what makes it so beautiful. If you haven't been, it's a really rugged place. And you might walk around the city of Asheville and you see the hills in the distance. But when you get up in those mountains, it is really remote. But it's also, you're surrounded on all sides by this elevation and by the extreme slopes. So when you're raining on this, and we talked about it being all runoff before, you are creating these funneling currents of water down the sides of the mountain. And in many cases, what you're looking at here, this is liquefying the ground. You have these landslides. So we had 20 inches of rain at Carolina Beach 2.5 weeks ago. There's no such thing as a landslide there. Why? They don't have hills. They don't have mountains. The mountains are a lot more extreme when it comes to flash flooding potential than flat land or just slightly sloped land. So I definitely think it's a combination of the rugged terrain, the preconditions with the rainfall beforehand. But if there weren't mountains there, this is not happening the way that it did in Western North Carolina or upstate South Carolina for that matter. You didn't see the flood emergencies like this in Valdosta, Georgia. They just had all the trees down. Right.
Yeah.
So it's not the same thing. So that's kind of the difference.
Yeah, I think you summed it up nicely, right? It's not necessarily that we got a more direct impact in Florida, who had it as a Category 4, but when you factor in, and I think this is the heart of the question you were answering with, is that when you couple it with that terrain, it magnifies the impact of the disaster afterwards. Yeah. Tim, go ahead. I don't know if you have.
I don't even think that we talked much about the angle of approach. This thing curling northwestward around the upper low. If it had just come up and if it curled to the northeast, let's say, well, then that puts the mountains on the other side of the circulation. That could have changed things quite a bit. But with it curling in the eye of the remnant eye wall, passing off into Tennessee, well, then you're really pushing and accentuating that angle, basically perpendicular to the mountain slope, which is the worst thing that you can do because it just amplifies the upward motion.
Yeah, worst case scenario. Tim, we appreciate all your coverage. We know we got to let you go too. You got another 11 o'clock newscast to prepare for. Anything else you wanted to mention to the audience here tonight?
No, just really appreciate you guys for what you're doing. Lots of hard work all around and going to be a lot more of it. So thanks for continuing. The more we can talk about it, the more help we'll get there. I think that's really important. And, hopefully it's a long time before we see one like this again. But it is concerning, 2 20-inch rain events in the Carolinas in just a couple of weeks. Not the first ones we've seen the last couple of decades. So definitely a bad trend for sure.
I know. I agree. When you look at the South Carolina numbers and, the top 3 are 2018 followed by 2 from 2024. You're like, what is happening?
Yeah.
All right, Tim, thank you so much for your work and our wishes to your crews that are out there. Keep them safe, and to your community for stepping up to really help. We appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks, guys.
I will let everybody know before we go tonight, we're going to hear from Sean Hendricks. He's the chief of staff with Mr. Beast, popular YouTube channel based here in the Carolinas. He took Starlink satellites up to Asheville to help restore communications. Our friends at Chaser Chat talked with him. But I got our panel, Jared and Frank, with us here, and I want to make sure you guys had a moment to also share your thoughts, because I know it's been a tough week for everybody, regardless of where you live.
Yeah, I'm one of the few fortunate ones. I did not lose power. It came close. Like I said, I got up at 4 a.m. back on Friday because that's when the wind was really getting bad, and my power flickered a lot until early afternoon, but it never went out. So I caught a break there. My internet went out, which was kind of surprising that the power did not go out, but the internet did. But thankfully, cellular was a good backup, or else I would have had to drive in the storm to a place that had internet access to do my job.
Yeah. Well, and Frank, I also want to, let people know, you grew up in Rock Hill. You've been attached to the weather for a long time. You have family spread out across the Carolinas. So, even if you had the lights on, you're watching this play out in your backyard, probably thinking about your family who's maybe even closer to it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and couldn't get a hold of them. Like, for example, my parents live in Polk County. For the unfamiliar, that's roughly halfway between Spartanburg and Asheville. And they are kind of on the edge of the disaster zone. Their power went out Friday morning, still hasn't come back on.
Wow.
Their cellular service, there's only one tower that's really close enough to get a usable signal. They can text from another tower nearby, but there's only one that provides phone call quality signal to them.
Mm-hmm.
Both the towers were disabled on Friday, and one of them came back today. They can send text messages again from home now, but they have no power. They can't make cell phone calls. They have their phones. Of course, you require electricity to operate. They still have an old-fashioned landline, but they can't use it because it requires electricity to power it. So they can't make calls. I say they have the landline. They don't have a way to even know if it's working. It might be down too. Who knows? But at least it's not as bad as it is 10 miles away in Lake Lure. My parents have trees down. They had a tree that missed the house by 5 feet. So fortunately, they have no damage to the house, but it was a close call. But going on North Carolina Highway 9, away from 74 kind of connects Charlotte to 26 there north of Spartanburg. If going toward Lake Lure, you take NC Highway 9. You go to the entrance to my parents' house, to my parents' neighborhood, and that's as far as you can go on Highway 9. Because another mile down the road, the Green River Bridge just down from the Lake Adger Dam is washed out. It's gone. Can't get to Lake Lure from my parents' house unless you.
For anybody who hasn't seen it yet, this is video of Lake Lure. This is not just random video. Yeah. This is from Charlotte City Councilman Tarak Bakari went up there, and so much of the debris in Lake Lure is not just from the community of Lake Lure. It's also from upstream Chimney Rock and other
Chimney Rock.
That so hard. Yeah.
For those of you familiar with Chimney Rock Village, you're looking at Chimney Rock Village right now. It's in Lake Lure.
Looking at pieces of it.
Yeah,
I'll tell you, that was one of the scariest moments, if I can reflect being in a TV newsroom, is when the emergency management folks came into the internal official behind the scenes chat that's being used by the Weather Service and broadcast media and emergency management to help convey information to the public. And you came in all caps and said, evacuate immediately. The dam is imminently about to breach in Lake Lure. I mean, that stopped the presses. Got the attention.
They were, of course, deeply worried about that at SCEMD because obviously that water flows downstream.
And I think that's so key, right? So it's not just a problem in the Lake Lure community; it's everyone upstream and downstream. Yeah, we should say that the dam is stable. It's still standing. Has been deemed safe. But you're absolutely right, Frank. It's no one problem here is isolated unto its own.
No. And let me relate another story about my parents. As I said, their power went out Friday, so no TV, didn't have a radio, didn't have internet access, didn't have cell phone. So they were isolated and had no idea what was going on. And their power was out Friday and Saturday and Sunday. And they finally decided, okay, we need to take a shower. So we're going to a hotel room. And they were fortunate to find a hotel for one night only in Forest City. And they were fortunate enough that they could actually get out of their neighborhood and drive to Forest City. And that's when they found out how bad things really were, because they were able to turn the TV on and call me. And I told my dad, he says, Chimney Rock is gone, right? He says, the village Chimney Rock is gone. I didn't say the village, I said Chimney Rock is gone. He's like, as in the thumb fell down?
Right.
I'm like, no, not that.
Yeah.
The village, Dad, the place where the people are, that is gone and is in Lake Lure now.
Yeah.
Because that's what the water did there. And he was like, oh, that's just as I said, if the thumb fallen down, you would have felt the earthquake from that. Because that's like 1,000 feet down to the valley floor that would fall. That would have been pretty impressive, but that's not what happened. It's the village that where people actually live. That's what got washed away.
In my experience,
in the Lake Lure. And that was also scary to him too. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is, part of your disaster prep needs to not just be the food and the water and the stuff to do, but also a way to get news from the outside world. Radio's still a thing, y'all.
It is.
AM
We
radio.
We just talked about that. You and I, right? Yeah. Frank, your story about the story you shared about your parents, in my experience, reminded me of where I was on 9/11, which was in a school classroom that did not have television. We did not yet have internet. There was a radio, but the teacher wasn't playing it for anyone but himself on headphones. And it wasn't until I got home hours later that I suddenly learned about all of the things I had missed while I didn't have access to communication. Or, I understand this is apples and oranges for many different reasons, but just that time lapse of how long have I been gone? That in your story, Frank, you're telling your parents like a whole town is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually too, because Lake Lure is essentially wiped off the map too, I guess.
It is. Yeah.
Because Chimney Rock's debris kind of tore it all up. Another thing that kind of goes in the back of my head, I mentioned North Carolina Highway 9. There are plans to widen that because there's a lot of traffic on it. Again, going back to the question about, what's the problem? Was it just the weather? Is there infrastructure? What else? Infrastructure is part of it too. Highway 9's old. And so it's no surprise to me that they kind of got washed away in a lot of places. When they go to rebuild it, are they going to go ahead and make 9 4 lanes? Which means some properties that were, used to be there in Lake Lure, when they're able to start rebuilding, and may not be there because there may need to be a road there. And they're like, well, we're going to make this 4 lanes anyway. May as well do it now when there's, although we just haul all this debris out. And before somebody can build here, let's just build the road. And then people who thought, well, I got my insurance money, time to rebuild. You can't, because now they've put a road there.
I wrote a story today, Frank,
with another idea.
That the Blue Ridge Parkway in North Carolina, the whole thing in North Carolina is closed. The beautiful scenic drive managed by the National Park Service is closed. And in writing that story, I was trying to give some background context to anyone who might be reading it nationally who doesn't maybe know what the Blue Ridge Parkway is. And I, wrote like, it was funded by President Roosevelt's Great New Deal. And I was like,
yeah.
This is really
it's
old.
been refurbished from time to time.
Sure.
But on the other hand,
but I was just going to say, like, the funding, right? The funding of putting people back to work, what was then the Depression. And here you're going to have an economic hit to the mountains, and they're going to need money to come in to rebuild these things.
Mm-hmm. And that's another thing. If you're someone who was looking for a job before the disaster, you're going to be unemployed for a while, folks, because there's a lot of jobs are gone, because a lot of businesses are gone and aren't coming back for a while, if at all.
The whole fall foliage season, which is the bread and butter of the mountains, short of the ski season, is going to be non-existent. We're going to run a little tight on time, and I want to still make sure we get to the piece about the Starlink. But Jared, I can see it in your eyes. I can see it in your face. The conversation tonight, but for you here in the Carolina Weather Group, it started with tornadoes at whatever o'clock that was on Thursday into Friday.
Yeah, and yet it feels like we got it on easy mode. It was a very hard night for a lot of people. It was a very scary night for a lot of people. Warning after warning after warning after warning. But we were back to normal Friday evening down here. It was kind of remarkable. I have colleagues that are still out of power in upstate South Carolina.
Sure.
Just incredibly fortunate. It is very strange. I think as we alluded to earlier, it is very strange for us at the coast to come out better in a hurricane than the folks inland. And that's just, Helene was one of those that is one of those things that is difficult to explain. It was previously unthinkable. Our tornado little mini outbreak, I guess you can call it an outbreak, overnight. I mean, we just done that a month ago with Debbie. So, we're getting quite an education all over the place between the tropical tornado threat and then the flooding that happens. And it has been we've been very fortunate too. There were a lot of warnings, but there was some tornado damage, but we got lucky in many ways, and it's important for us to acknowledge that. There are so many drives going on right now. There are so many just all over the place, just every brewery, every business, just everybody coming together to help. And that has been really great. A lot of folks here recognizing that.
Yeah. You see this comment?
Yeah.
From Clay. So yeah. Clay's been with us throughout the whole show tonight. Works for the National Weather Service, saying that a lot of their folks in upstate South Carolina, like you mentioned, Jared, still without power. Also, I keep bragging on Clay, but Clay has been in the thick of this with his colleagues at the National Weather Service, and he's been commenting with us the whole hour. And I'm touched, Clay, that after all you've been through, you want to sit here with us tonight and talk more about it. I'm touched. Maybe it's helpful in a way. And I will also let folks know that Clay and others were our conduit to this event that was supposed to happen this weekend in upstate South Carolina. It's been canceled for obvious reasons. But like so many other events have been canceled. Again, an economic hit, an education, a tourism, and outreach thing. So we hope that those events will come back to the community real soon. Hey, here's a little touch of normalcy from our friend Evan Fisher, who lives outside Asheville. This picture today in the Black Rock area, a postal truck. How many days go by where you see a postal truck on the road where you live? Probably every day, and you don't think twice about it. But put yourself into their shoes where they've been cut off from the outside world. Normalcy has not existed. And here today, Evan photographing an everyday scene of a mail truck being delivered. Small little slice of everyday life. Our own Scotty Powell, who works and lives in Myrtle Beach now, like Jared just mentioned, in one of those communities where supplies are being gathered. He took supplies from Myrtle Beach up to his hometown of Morganton. He is there tonight. That is why he's not with us on the show, but he did manage to get out this message. Heart-wrenching photos, as he writes on X, made it back to Morganton today to check on family and friends. Thank the Lord everyone is okay and damage-free. There are a lot of people who have lost everything and are suffering. Please keep them in your thoughts and your prayers. Floodwaters are powerful. More pictures to come. Take a look at this. These are the foundations to what I imagine used to be a home. That might actually be pictures, pieces of the home up against those trees in the background. Scotty is there. He is visiting with friends and loved ones that he too went days without talking to and has since reconnected with them. He's also gathering some material that we will be using in a telethon this Sunday at 7 p.m. right here on the Carolina Weather Group. We are so pleased that our friends from Other Weather Podcast, Weather Brains, Chaser Chats, and Stormfront Freaks are coming back together. We worked with them in the fall to do a fundraiser drive for the American Red Cross, and I'm sorry to say that that money is coming here now to the Carolinas and to the Southeast. But I'm happy to say those men and women of those other shows stepped up immediately. Jared and I sent them an email on Saturday that essentially said, SOS, we need some help here. And they replied so quickly. They said, we are in. What do you need? And the replies were so fast. It was lovingly uplifting, and so fast I didn't even have an answer to what we needed. We just knew we needed something. So if you wish to donate now, the drive is already open. QR code is on your screen. If you don't wish to donate to the American Red Cross, you want to donate someplace else, that's totally fine. We just want to try to give folks an option. And so as part of that collaborative with all of those other weather podcasts, we've all been gathering stories about the ongoing efforts here in the Carolinas and beyond. And so Gabe from Chaser Chat, that's another one of those shows that is out there that you can listen to if you love weather. He did an interview with Sean Hendricks. He is the chief of staff for Mr. Beast, a very popular YouTube channel, especially if you have kids. Mr. Beast lives in Greenville, North Carolina. Well, they sent Sean up to the mountains to aid with storm relief. And I'm trying to find the picture of it here because Sean, here it is. Sean brought a bunch of Starlink satellites to restore communication. And he actually tweeted at Elon Musk, can you make Starlink free for the next 30 days? And Elon quote tweeted him back and said, exactly that Starlink would be free for the next 30 days if you lived in the impacted areas, so that you wouldn't have to pay for the service, which helps with those who are receiving donated units or maybe have units of their own. I highly encourage you to go to Starlink's website if you can get there to learn what the terms are, but they expect it to be free for the next 30 days or so. And so Gabe talked with Sean, who was up there in the mountains. It's an audio-only conversation because connectivity is still very limited, but they're going to let us play that interview for you right now here on the Carolina Weather Group. Take a listen.
Hey there, folks. I've got Sean Hendricks on the line right now. He is part of the Mr. Beast crew, and he is also from North Carolina, as that's where Mr. Beast operations are ran out of. Sean, how's it going today?
Good. We got DOT starting to catch up to us where we're at on these rescue efforts and getting the roads open. We've been focused on getting life-saving supplies up to people that are up in the mountains. There's no roads left. This isn't something you can in a couple of days. But they have been building roads for us and getting us closer and closer. Supplies are starting to roll in. We're no longer limited to one bottle of water a day. So that's great. We're actually starting to see some food and water come in. Water's actually pretty good today. Not seeing much of an issue. But yeah, big, huge swing. This is the way it is always in these areas. It's really bad, and then it starts to pick up really fast as everybody gets here and all the stuff starts rolling in.
So it sounds like it's a momentum play where things start to snowball in the right direction.
That's right. Yeah. It's like there's no water, and it's, oh my God, we need to move more water, get more trucks, get water out to people. But the thing to remember is when we're doing good down here in the city, we're still trying to get to people who are living way back in these mountains. This is a pretty mountainous area. It's rough. And the amount of water up here was over 30 inches. And we're talking about it carved. It's not that the road pavement's gone. The road bed's gone, right? It's now a canyon. There's not even a place to clear off, right? We're talking, I don't know, I'm speaking out of turn here. I'm not a transportation expert, but my mind to recover that has been reshaped by this water flow.
Now, a couple of things that I wanted to ask you about, because I've been following along your Twitter timeline, and there's been some really interesting stuff that I think we haven't seen before with disaster recovery efforts in the past. Could you speak a little bit about how Starlink is helping everybody this time around?
Well, it's something that's so catastrophic. There's no cell towers. There's no electricity. We're back to the Stone Ages, right? Ham radio is wonderful. It still is. Radios are for point-to-point, team-to-team, local communication. But ham radio is much harder to get out or to get information out of what we need in this area. So local comms, point-to-point, ham radio. Starlink gets us out and tells people what we need to come in with. And a Starlink size of a backpack, and it does more than these huge EMS trailers that have the satellite dishes on them. It's faster, it's easier to set up, and it uses less power. You can't hike a trailer back up in the woods. It's given us high-speed comms. The fact that I'm able to post videos is because we are traveling around with Starlinks everywhere we go. So people are getting real-time updates of what's going on And I'm able to literally ask for supplies to the entire world at a moment's notice. Hey, we need baby food. Hey, we need porta potties. Hey, I needed batteries flown from Florida, and we got them. You know what I mean? It's been incredible what Starlink's allowed us to do.
Yeah, it really seems like some of the better aspects of modern technology, social media, really shining through during this event.
100%. Yeah, social media for social good. And also
Absolutely.
the other thing too is I've got a little bit of influence on the internet, and what is it worth other than like self-gratification? But then all of a sudden now you can turn it into really helping people. So I think that's the good side of it. I think maybe that's where you focus on more. But it's been wonderful to see how people, they reshare and they message me. I got a friend of a friend who has a private plane that's willing to loan it to you. Wow. I just got a PJ for free because of X. And that's the power that social media has. So I think it gets demonized, but here it is. It's saving lives. There's no doubt. I can say that without a doubt. It's saving lives, period. And then again, at the Starlink side, they've been great. Actually, at Starlink reach out to me. They've made my account. Any Starlink dish I add to my account is free now.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, Sarah at Starlink reached out. They talked to whoever they needed to talk to at their side and got it done quick. So now we're just able to have these pre-set up, and I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to worry about typing a credit card number in or all that. It takes time, and minutes matter. And so in fact, I can just turn it on, and it's just on my account and paid for. It saves us 10, 20 minutes every time we set up. I don't know if I can explain how massive that amount of time is.
Oh, it absolutely sounds like it would just add up if you had to keep doing it over and over again. And the last thing I wanted to ask you about before we talk about how people can help if they're so inclined is drones, because I see you guys are working a lot with those. And I imagine, especially given the terrain, and like you mentioned, it's not just roads that are gone. It's like literally the entire road bed that's gone. How are drones helping you guys to actually get supplies out there, help find survivors, that sort of thing?
Two ways. Thermal drones tell us what houses have people in them. Right, we see warm pipes, we see people out cleaning up their yards. So we go through with thermal drones and tag them, and then we could send a drone that has a speaker and a microphone on it, and they come back to me. We basically fly it down there, and they talk to the drone and tell us what they need. I need baby food. I need heart medicine. I need oxygen. So we don't just bring them protein bars and water when the guy needs his heart medicine. So we're able to target life-saving, because we just can't get these people out. There's no getting these people out of the situation. We're talking miles and miles of washed-out roads. The other way we use it is, let's just say there's a downed bridge, and we get the community to gather on the other side of the bridge while the water's just ripping through, and we can use the drone to hop it over the bridge over and over again. We can move a pallet every 15 minutes or something. And so it lets us, that last 100 feet that we can't cross, get stuff to people. So that's been pretty helpful. The main thing is I think people get frustrated with FEMA or with National Guard, whatever the government response is. They have to understand that's recovery. Like that takes time to get moving. It's a big machine. Rescue really is you first, right? Self-rescue is the thing you have the most control over. Then once you've done everything you can do, it's your local PD, your local firefighters, and your local people that are really going to affect day one rescue. It's just not realistic to think the government is going to be there for you on day one. And to be frustrated about it, and worse, plan on that happening is how you end up in a bad situation. Expect a self-rescue, and then expect your local community to rescue you secondly. And the more people that self-rescue, the less burden it is on the local PD and fire departments and people to get people out of there. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. I think that's a good lesson for everybody to keep in mind moving forward for maybe how to plan for situations like this in the future.
100%. Yep. I've never got to see a on this level, and I'm consider myself well prepared. This changed my mind about a lot of things.
I'm hearing from people that this is like biblical proportions in terms of just how devastating some of these events are to these communities.
Yeah, 1 in 1,000 year. I would say it's probably more 1 in 10,000 year. You look at the amount of change to the terrain that happened. If you came out here in a year, you would say, oh, this canyon was formed over 1 million years. I'm like, no, buddy, that was 33 minutes on a night in September.
Crazy. All right, Sean, we know you're busy, so I won't hold you any longer. But before I let you go, could you, number one, tell people where they can find you on social media so they can continue to follow along with the efforts? And then number two, and most importantly, what they do to help right now? Someone's listening, they've got their debit card out, and they want to direct their assistance in a particular direction.
Yeah, you can follow me. I'm mostly posting on X, DSHAWN Hendrix, the Sean Hendricks. Look for the verification because there are people out there trying to raise money under my name, and it is a scam. The way to help is Samaritan's Purse, donate to them, or to go to your local distribution centers and drop off what they're asking for. Please don't go to the store and buy cases of water if your distro center is being asked for baby food. It actually puts a burden on us to try to move all that water when we have people begging for baby food. So talk to your local distribution center, local church, whoever's doing that, and just meet the needs, meet whatever they're asking for, and really stick to what they're asking for. That'll just help.
Excellent, Sean. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to join us and talk to the folks that listen to Chaser Chat. You stay safe out there, and God bless all of you that are helping out with the recovery.
Hey, thank you so much.
Again, that's from Chaser Chat. You can listen to Gabe and Kay wherever you listen to audio podcast. I had a chance to chat with them about what we are seeing here at home, and they will be participating in our Weather Pods Disaster Relief Telethon to aid the American Red Cross and all those impacted by Helene, coming your way Sunday at 7 p.m. All right, let me bring back in Frank and Jared, who I think we're going to be signing off here tonight. If you're new, we are here every Wednesday night talking about weather, science, technology, and more. And we've had lots of special episodes dropping on our YouTube channel, but also wherever you get audio podcasts. We've been turning around the Governor Cooper, the Governor McMaster emergency briefings. So folks who might be able to maybe stream audio but not stream video could take a listen on those. I do want to remind folks that counties are eligible for FEMA assistance to purchase essential items, secure temporary housing, and repair your home. So to be eligible for those, you can sign up at disasterassistance.gov, call 1-800-621-3362, or use the FEMA app. You have to be in one of these North Carolina counties in order to be eligible, or you can be in one of these South Carolina counties in order to be eligible. We also have a phone number here in North Carolina that is maintained by the United Way of North Carolina if you need immediate access to food or water or want to report a missing person. Inside the state, you can dial 211. If you're watching from out of state, you can dial 1-888-892-1162 to reach that state-sanctioned hotline from the United Way of North Carolina. Frank, Jared, I think that does it for this week's edition of the Carolina Weather Group.
Yep.
There's a lot more that could be said, but we don't have all night.
Yep.
Well, we will continue to follow everything that is yet to come. We will be here to try to help you discern fact from fiction. You heard Sean say people are impersonating him. There's misinformation that is circulating on social media. So we're using our social media platforms, Facebook, X, or whatever it may be, to try to share what we think is some of the most relevant and verified information from emergency officials and elsewhere. If you're looking to make a donation, we have set up one that we know is secure. If you want to donate to Samaritan's Purse, like Sean mentioned, an aid effort out of Boone or elsewhere, that's fine too. Just make sure you've got the correct link when you go to make that donation. But we're going to leave it here for now.
Your toes, because there are people out there, as if you didn't have enough to deal with, there are dirt bags who will try to take advantage of you when you're at your worst, in your worst condition. So keep that in mind.
Anecdotally speaking, I would say that this has been one of the worst disasters that I've seen for misinformation, for scammers, unfortunately. So we really need folks to be on their guard. We really need folks to be, checking the verification on their sources before you share. Make sure it's real. Only share from from verified emergency management sources, news media, things like that. It's really important that people do that, because there is a lot of bad information getting around right now, and we've got to be able to put a stop to that.
Yeah, and it's not just misinformation showing up online and people trying to scam you online. It's also people claiming to be this roofing company from Tennessee. They're just come here to just help things get fixed sooner, but they take your money and then they're gone, and your roof doesn't get fixed, and you don't have your money anymore.
With that, you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, that is
be careful.
that happens. Yeah. with that being said, we appreciate you being here with us on the Carolina Weather Group, trusting us to relay information to you and joining us here in this conversation tonight. We hope you learned a little something. Maybe you found some part of it therapeutic. I know I'm finding the connection with my fellow human beings really helpful, as I too, like so many of you, work to process all of this. On behalf of Jared and Frank, and special thanks to Tim and Brad and to everyone who has been impacted by this disaster in our own backyard. Stay safe. We will talk to you again real soon. Good night.
Hang in there, y'all.